Okay, let's jump right into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really gripping sequential visual narrative told through 40 distinct scenes. We're looking at a classic 19th century tale of survival, stolen maps, and poisoned gold. It's a story where pure, unadulterated greed meets the ultimate deadly trap. Our main subjects? Two British drifters named Evans and Hooker, who have violently stolen the secret location of a massive treasure. And as we navigate this scene-by-scene journey, ranging from their initial approach to the island all the way to the chilling discovery of the poisoned gold, we're going to see exactly how their blind obsession leads them straight into an absolute nightmare. Let's get into it.
So, our story opens out on the open ocean, and man, you can practically feel the oppressive, sweltering heat radiating right off the water. Our two guys are stuck in this tiny, unprovisioned canoe, slowly creeping toward an uncharted tropical island. And the sky above them, it isn't just hot. As the story describes, it's blazing. It is an absolute furnace. They've been traveling all night after a desperate struggle. Their lips are hard, they're dry, they're cracking. Evans is in such extreme, unendurable agony from thirst that he can barely even focus on the massive fortune waiting for them. At this point, he literally just wants some sweet, fresh water.
Now, through Evans' hazy, exhausted dream, we actually get the bloody history of the very treasure they're hunting. 200 years ago, a stranded Spanish galleon from the Philippines ran aground, and the crew buried their gold for safekeeping. But shortly after that, the entire crew was wiped out by disease and mutiny, just vanishing into history. Fast forward to just 1 year ago, a lone Chinese sailor named Chang He wanders ashore, stumbles upon these ancient ingots, and with infinite toil reburies them to keep them, quote, very safe. And, well, that brings us to the present day, where Evans and Hooker have ruthlessly stolen that secret.
But wait, how exactly did they get this map? Well, it definitely wasn't a friendly transaction. In Evans' feverish dream, the violent reality of the theft flashes back. They attacked Shanghai. Evans vividly remembers grabbing the man by his pigtail, basically treating his life as totally expendable. But the thing that really stands out in this nightmare is the dramatic irony of their victim's final expression. After all the fear and the struggle, Shanghai grinned, a deeply incomprehensible, terrifyingly startling grin. You know, Shanghai knew something they didn't, and I promise you, that grin is going to haunt absolutely every step they take on this island. Snapping awake as they finally reach the lagoon, the two men pull out their prize. It's this rough, yellowing map, creased and worn to the point where it's practically falling apart in their hands. To navigate into the lagoon and actually find the gold, they have to follow 3 really precise visual markers. First, find a gap in the white surf of the coral reef. Second, paddle in until they line up exactly with a clump of 3 palm trees on the shore. And finally, strike a completely straight line directly into the dense bush until they hit a freshwater stream. Sounds simple enough, right? Now what's really interesting here is a tiny, seemingly insignificant detail Evans spots. Right alongside the faded pencil lines and the Chinese writing, Evans notices these mysterious little dashes scattered around the treasure's location. He just casually brushes them off, guessing they might be, I don't know, the plan of a house or just meaningless scribbles. He literally says he can't get a notion of what they mean. But keep these dashes in the back of your mind. It's a brilliant piece of foreshadowing, and brushing them off, yeah, that's going to be the single greatest mistake of his life. So leaving the canoe behind, they push through the thick reeds and step right into the virgin forest. And notice the stark atmospheric contrast here. Out on the ocean, they were trapped in the blaze of the sunlight in a literal furnace. But the second they step into the jungle, the environment instantly flips. The blazing sun is completely replaced by cool shadow, somber darkness, and these massive trees that rise up like vast pillars to a canopy far overhead. Honestly, it feels like a huge relief from the heat at first, but don't be fooled. This dim, silent darkness is entirely false. It's not a sanctuary, it's a tomb. As they blindly push forward, desperately trying to keep that straight line toward the river, Hooker suddenly stops dead in his tracks. His eyes catch something completely unnatural hiding among the dim white flowers and blotched fungi. Something blue, he says. As they step closer, the suspense just spikes. It's the figure of a Chinese man lying face down in the dirt, and the complete abandon of the pose makes it instantly clear to both of them there's no way he's sleeping. They have just stumbled upon a dead body right in the middle of this silent, isolated forest. Let's play detective for a second and analyze the grim clues Hooker spots as they stand over this totally ominous crime scene. Okay, nearby there's a spade of Chinese design. A little further off there's a scattered heap of stones, which, by the way, was exactly the marker they were looking for. Next to that, a freshly dug hole. And then, of course, the corpse itself. Hooker notices the man's neck is incredibly puffed in purple, and his hands and ankles are severely swollen. Someone clearly beat our two thieves to the treasure site, but whoever it was, they met an incredibly swift and gruesome end.
So what does Evans do when faced with this horrific scene? I mean, does he pause? Does he investigate? No way. The only thing on his mind is the number 200. This gold has been sitting in the earth for 2 centuries before Chiang Hai found it, and that historical weight completely fuels Evans' blind greed. When Hooker suggests the dead man was killed by a snake and actually hesitates out of pure fear, Evans literally waves it off. He calls the body a mass of corruption and demands they get the gold out immediately. Greed has entirely overwritten his basic survival instincts.
Evans violently shoves his way to the freshly dug hole and starts frantically clearing away the brown soil with his bare hands. He reaches in and pulls out an ingot, a massive, heavy bar of cast metal. Evans hefts this dull yellow block in his hands, completely exultant, declaring that absolutely nothing but gold or lead could weigh this much. He throws his jacket onto the ground and just starts tossing these incredibly heavy bars onto the fabric, piling them up so they can haul them back to the canoe.
But right in the middle of this frantic, greedy excavation, something incredibly subtle happens. As Evans bends down to pull out another heavy mass of gold, he feels a tiny prick on his hand. He stops, pulls a delicate, slender spike out of his skin with his fingers, and just keeps going. Doesn't even think twice. A few seconds later, he finds that another little thorn has punctured his skin. Again, he barely registers it. His sheer excitement absolutely blinds him to the fact that the soil itself has been weaponized. And this brilliantly illustrates just how terrifyingly fast the trap takes effect. They lift the coat full of gold and take maybe, 100 yards of steps before Evans starts to decline rapidly. Let's track his symptoms, because it happens fast. First, he complains his arms ache, just blaming it on the paddling. Then, his face turns dead white, completely covered in drops of sweat. Next comes this abrupt transition to completely unreasonable anger and irritation, snapping at Hooker. And finally, with a sudden groan, he clutches his throat, stumbles, and slowly slips down the trunk of a tree, collapsing into a crumpled, convulsing heap on the forest floor. Hooker approaches him totally horrified, asking if he can help, but Evans' body is already severely distorted with pain, his hands clenched convulsively. He gasps out, "Don't touch me," and then he speaks his dying words, "Put the gold back on the coat." Think about that. Even as he spasmodically twists on the ground, his life fading by the second, his absolute obsession with the treasure remains his one and only priority. The guy is literally dying, and all he cares about is making sure the gold is secured. It's chilling.
Shaken to his core, Hooker obediently turns back to the heavy coat full of yellow bars. But as Hooker handles the ingots to gather them up, he feels a little prick on the ball of his own thumb. He stops. His jaw drops. He looks down at his hand and sees a slender thorn, maybe 2 inches in length, sticking right out of his skin. With dilated eyes, he looks from the thorn in his hand, over to Evans convulsing on the dirt, and then through the trees to the swollen, blue-clad body of the dead Chinese man.
In an instant, the horrifying reality of the situation washes over Hooker. He recognizes that delicate spike. These thorns are identical to the ones the native Dayaks used to poison their blowing tubes. It is a deadly, incredibly fast-acting toxin. Chiang Hai hadn't just reburied the gold to keep it hidden out of sight. No, he had carefully laid a microscopic, lethal trap in the very soil surrounding the treasure to ensure its absolute safety against anyone who tried to take it.
Let's jump back to that map from earlier. Remember those mysterious little dashes that Evans just brushed off? We can now see the tragic, fatal difference between their assumption and reality. Evans assumed they were a harmless houseplant, or just meaningless pencil marks. But the terrifying reality? Those dashes were an explicit warning. They marked a deadly minefield of poisoned thorns buried right into the dirt over the gold. The map told them exactly what was waiting for them, but their blind greed and pure arrogance blinded them to the danger.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is this moment of tragic clarity for Hooker. As he stares at the thorn, he suddenly understands exactly what Chiang Hai meant when he boasted about the safety of his treasure. And more importantly, he finally understands that startling, incomprehensible grin from Evans' dream. It was the grin of a man who knew his ultimate revenge was already set in stone. Panicking, Hooker starts sucking furiously at the little pink spot on his thumb, sucking for dear life, but within moments, he feels that strange, aching pain spreading into his own arms and shoulders.
Realizing that sucking the poison out is entirely useless, Hooker abruptly stops. He just sits down next to the massive pile of gold ingots, rests his chin on his hands, completely paralyzed, and simply stares at the distorted, quivering body of his companion. The dull pain creeps steadily up his throat, and in brilliant contrast to the violent greed of these men, the forest around them remains hauntingly peaceful. A faint breeze stirs the canopy, and the delicate white petals of an unknown flower come floating down through the dim gloom, quietly covering the scene of their demise.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a lingering thought. This story forces us to look really closely at the themes of arrogance and greed. Evans and Hooker viewed themselves as superior. They violently took what they wanted and treated Chang He's life as totally worthless. Yet their blind greed led them directly into a trap laid by a much more calculated mind. So, looking at this visual tale of theft and poetic justice, the narrative asks us a pretty heavy question. Between the thieves who murdered for a map and the man who weaponized the earth to protect his secret, who were the true savages of the story? Thanks for joining me to unpack this fascinating narrative. I hope it leaves you with something powerful to think about.